Hello, I am Angelina. Welcome to today's Purple Evolution podcast. Today's guest is Dian Killian, and she is a trainer and coach for a teaching called Nonviolent Communication, also known as NVC. This was created in the 1960s and is a wonderful way to communicate without judgment or demands. Dian's demeanor is calm, and she is so knowledgeable about how to communicate in a loving way that is very effective. Pretty powerful stuff. Maybe we can all learn to be better communicators. No demands, only if you want to. Now, enjoy the podcast.
Martin Luther King championed the civil rights movement. This is the Right to Be Civil movement.
Y'all wanna know who you voted for, so they can let you in or show you the door. She votes left and he votes right. It's a hell of a recipe for a holiday fight. Let me tell you now,
from our recording studio in Castleberry, Florida, and our production house in Coral Springs, you're listening to the Purple Evolution podcast.
I don't know any left people, I don't know any right people. We're all different shades of humanity. I don't know any red people, I don't know any blue people. We're all different shades of humanity.
My name is Doug Halper, and with your permission, I will be your guide on a journey through all things purple regarding the coexistence of human beings on this wonderful planet we call home. The creator of the Purple Evolution, my friend and our host, is Armand Volpe, who for over 40 years has been dedicated to being a stand for love. Along with his bride Angelina, Armand has stood true to this commitment through the mediums of public speaking, performing songwriter, TV and radio appearances, magazine and book publishing, personal counseling, and now the world of podcasting. Please help me welcome my favorite civil servant, or more aptly put, servant for civility, Armand.
Good afternoon, Doug. Here we are again, having some fun with communication. And today is very special because we have a special guest here that's going to take purpleness to a whole new level for a lot of people. I know that it's fine when we do them by ourselves, but this is some gravy, some extra, a bonus. In Louisiana, as occasion, we have a term called lagniappe. And lagniappe is like a baker's dozen. And I feel like Dian is lagniappe today, adding to the Purple Evolution with her information and her enthusiasm. And I'm just very excited to learn more about what she's into and what she's taught and how she got into it and all that. So I'll send it back to you, brother.
Lagniappe. Is that L-A-N-Y-A-P?
Lagniappe. Well, you got to say it with the lagniappe.
Okay, French, right. I had to go there. Lagniappe. I'm glad to explain what that means because it sounded a little bit kinky. I'm not sure what. Okay, lagniappe. Well, Dian Killian is our guest today, and our both a dear friend of mine and Armand's, Lisa Firestone, who is an amazing singer, songwriter, performer out of Nashville, Tennessee, introduced Dian to us and said you need to talk to her about NVC, Nonviolent Communication, because it is exactly in tune with what you're trying to Purple Evolution. And of course, in the Purple Evolution, we're trying to get civil dialect, civil conversation between people of differing opinions. And mostly that occurs in our show around the field of politics, but of course can be applied anywhere, especially in personal lives. And nonviolent communication seems to be applicable to just about any field as well. Just a few things I wrote down here about Dian Killian, Ph.D., is a certified trainer with the International Center for Nonviolent Communication, a graduate of the Coaching for Transformation program, an author of 2 books, one of them Urban Empathy, True Life Adventures of Compassion on the Streets of New York, which I saw the chapter she has online. It's absolutely adorable. And Connecting Across Differences, How to Connect with Anyone, Anytime, Anywhere. Incredibly powerful. She is the founder of the Center for Collaborative Communication, current trainer and coach via her company, work collaboratively to diverse organizations from small and large NGOs to multinational and Fortune 100 companies. She is the founder and leader of the International NVC Women's Retreat, and she is the facilitator of public programming across America, Asia, and Europe. Whew, that's a lagniappe and a half. That's a couple of lagniappes. So, that being said, welcome to our show. Dian, it's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here. I love the name of your podcast. Such a great idea to call it Purple, Between Red and Blue.
That was all Armand's idea. Armand, how did you start TPE?
So very briefly, the idea came to me that we're really not a blue and a red country. We're a purple country with people that think in different colors. And I started thinking, well, the same thing with race and politics and everything. We're just a diverse country of all these different colors, different shades of humanity. Happens to be a song I wrote years ago, and it's become our theme song. And so I thought, let's work with that. And then turned Doug onto it, and he helped me with the logo. And of course, the purple, the red and the blue in the Vesica Pisces, or the Venn diagram, is the purple. And so it just went from there. And of course, this is right in alignment with it.
Mm.
Yeah, and then Lisa, of course, is a big fan of the Purple Evolution, and she said you need to talk to Dian about NVC because it's just so in alignment with what you're all talking about. So to get us started, I would love it, Dian, if you would share with us, first of all, a little bit about yourself, especially if I missed anything in the intro, and a little bit about a general sense of what is nonviolent communication. Where did it start? Who started it? What's it all about? Give us a little bit of an intro to that.
Sure, happy to. Well, I think you covered me pretty well, so I will talk more about nonviolent communication. I prefer, by the way, and it's why my company is called Work Collaboratively. I prefer, especially working with companies and organizations, to call it collaborative communication, because for me, ultimately, it is about collaboration. How can people hear each other more effectively and work more effectively? And, I'm a creative person. I express my creativity in different ways. And one thing I love about practicing nonviolent communication and having empathy skills is seeing the magic that happens when 2 people or 2 parties or more hear each other who didn't hear each other before. What emerges? I even get kind of tingly just talking about this now, even though I've experienced it dozens and probably even hundreds of times now, that what are we capable of as human beings when we are resourced, when we actually trust that our needs matter, when we experience being heard, when our systems, our internal systems, can relax and we're not in fight or flight or freeze or disappear, and we can relax. That's when the blood can flow and the creativity happens, and then we can come up with totally new solutions. So for me, it is about collaboration. And to give a shout out to Marshall Rosenberg, the psychologist who developed this process. Marshall started developing it in the 1960s, and he called it nonviolent communication because he was very influenced by Gandhian principles. He actually saw nonviolent communication as a extension, like some people might say, like verbal judo. Not that I consider NVC. If NVC was a martial arts, it'd be more like Aikido, in my opinion, than judo. But he saw it as an extension of Gandhian principles, which is why he called it nonviolent communication. And as many of your listeners probably know, and you two, I'm guessing, may know, that's the closest translation in English of the Sanskrit word ahimsa, which I think is hard to translate exactly into English. As an aside, I'm a little sad that it's a negative. It's nonviolent, because for me, some people also call it compassionate or conscious communication. What it's really about is going towards what we want to achieve in life. As Marshall Rosenberg, who developed the process, said, what will make life more wonderful? And what are our needs? How can we more effectively meet our needs? And that's like so core to the practice of nonviolent communication, or NVC, which is distinguishing the strategies. You know, my brother, by the way, has very different politics than I have. He voted for someone, well, you know, I'm just going to be transparent about it because it's easier than talking around it. I did vote for Biden. My brother is a very enthusiastic Trump supporter. He carries a gun. I'm a pacifist. I teach nonviolent communication. I'm a Quaker. He's all about the Fifth Amendment and carrying his gun. So we have very, very different political views. I forgot how actually I got there. I was talking about nonviolent communication, but anyway, yeah, maybe you remember my thread, but anyway, I'll just pause there and see what other questions you have, because.
Well, you were also talking about being able to be heard. And it's interesting, we're talking about nonviolent communication. I saw this quote on one of the websites. Marshall Rosenberg said, while we may not consider the way we talk to be violent, words often lead to hurt and pain, whether for others or ourselves. And I thought that was a really interesting way to put it, because I don't think my words are violent, but if you're causing pain, that's violence. Yes. And I really appreciate where you're coming from, of trying to see the positive side of it and working towards something as opposed to against something.
Oh, thank you. That jogs my memory. The reason I started talking about my brother is we have very different strategies, and I can still understand the needs underlying that. Like, we both are concerned about democracy and the integrity of our democracy in the United States. We're both concerned, wanting peace of mind about our future. So, you know, he has, I think he does predominantly listen to Fox News and things online. Different. I mean, I try to listen to a bit of Fox News every day too, just to have a balanced view. But my point is, you know, he's getting a certain, flow of information that, you know, for him is suggesting that Biden is going to be like a socialist, and we're going to be living in a communist country within 6 months. And so he's scared about democracy for different reasons than I was scared, seeing some of the things that Trump was doing that, in my opinion, was really eroding our democracy in the United States. But at the end of the day, we both care. So, and we're both scared. I just want to say this up front. One of the most powerful things I learned from Marshall Rosenberg is that unexpressed fear is almost always received by the listener, or experienced by the receiving party, as aggression. Mm. And the example I like to give about this, I kind of added to Marshall's idea, is if you think about a dog that's scared, like, you know, that archetypal snarling guard dog, like a German Shepherd, not that it has to be a German Shepherd, but often in the movies, for some reason, that's what it is. And, you know, that dog is snarling, baring his teeth. We're scared. We would consider that dog aggressive, but the dog is actually scared. So what's interesting is when, as human beings, when we are triggered, and by the way, fear is a broad spectrum. You can be terrified or you could be anxious. It's still in the same family of feelings. So if you're anxious and you are not aware of it yourself, or you haven't let the other person know that you're anxious, that will almost always be experienced by the receiving party as aggression. And when we're scared, because we're partly shut down and in fight or flight, because the blood isn't flowing, because we're in our reptilian brain, we don't even notice half the time that our tone of voice has changed, that our volume has increased, that we're speaking faster, that maybe our words, our choice of words are changing. And then the other person says, stop being so aggressive. And I'm like, what? I'm not being aggressive. What are you talking about? We don't even see it. So the point is, when I can come back to a lot of what I see is my brother's intensity often is fear. That helps me connect much more from the get-go with what's going on.
You talk about reactive mode. I noticed, I was either listening to your podcast or was reading something on your website or blog. You were talking about integrating the right and the left hemispheres of the brain. I have a friend who talks a lot about going from the brain stem to the prefrontal lobe and going from reactive to, conscious creative thinking, which sounds like what you just described right there. Do you also work with that in addition to the right and left?
Absolutely. And what's interesting to me is that Marshall Rosenberg developed the 4 core steps of nonviolent communication starting in the 1960s, decades before all this new research was coming out around neuroscience, or that your gut is actually another form of your stomach. Actually, that research was emerging, but then it didn't get sufficient attention. Now it's started to get more attention again, that the same neurons in our brain are in our stomach. So when we say in English, think with your gut, that's actually more accurate than we sometimes realize. But what's interesting to me is some of your listeners may be familiar with the 4 steps of nonviolent communication. The first step is coming up with an observation. And what's fascinating to me about that is that does 2 things automatically. First of all, it gets us back in our frontal lobe out of our lizard brain, out of our reptilian brain, but it also gets us back in our body in a different ways. And if you talk with anyone who's an expert in anger management, and interestingly, also people who do somatic work with trauma, which, by the way, I'm increasingly convinced is the only effective way to work with trauma is through somatics. I know I'm not the only one who believes that. And by the way, I just put 2 things together that in my mind are actually connected. When someone is angry and when they're triggered, what do anger management people talk about recommending? What do people dealing with trauma recommend? They're actually similar. And I don't think that's a coincidence. They're similar because I'm also convinced that when we're triggered, it's usually reactivating some kind of trauma that we've had. But the point is, it's very similar. Anger management professionals talk about, looking around, noticing things in your environment, changing your environment, getting outside for a walk, basically getting back into your body. Same thing if dealing with trauma. There's different techniques for getting back in your body, but one is noticing your feet on the floor, the sensation of your feet, whatever, even if you're in a 20-story building, just that contact of your butt on the chair, getting back into your body. So the observation step does that, because the observation step has to do with what are you seeing and what are you hearing. So for you to give an observation, you have to come back to the frontal lobe to think about that rather than reactive. And you start using your senses. So again, what's fascinating to me is before all this research, Marshall kind of hacked that years before, that this is what's going to help you. Now, that is accurate and true on one level, and it also helps connect with the other person. Because if you can give an observation about what did you hear, what did you see, we're already starting to disentangle the judgment. On one level, nonviolent communication is about how can we communicate our needs to someone, our feelings and needs, what's alive in us, free of judgment and blame, free of demand. So if you notice, when you have a judgment, usually the observation is missing. Stop being so obnoxious. Stop being so, pig-headed or so selfish, whatever our judgment is. Now, you may know from context why that person might be having that choice judgment about you. But if I just say to you, stop being so obnoxious, the more extreme the judgment is, the less information we actually have about what you said or did that triggered me. So the power of the observation is we are finding out you gave me the stimulus, which is different than causing me to get upset. So if I can tell you the stimulus, like if my brother says to me, oh, you're just one of those effing naive, stupid liberals, just leave the country, then that can become my observation. So Steve, when you tell me that you think I'm a stupid liberal and you just want me to leave the country, so I'm recapping my words. Now, by the way, as an aside, I wanted to talk about this today. Even if you don't learn all the steps of nonviolent communication, if someone else is triggered and you can just recap what you're hearing them say, that goes a long way to de-escalating, because one of the most basic human needs is just to be heard. So if you can say, yeah, this is what I'm hearing you say, that you just want me to leave the country. But my brother has said that to me when we've had discussions before. By the way, what's fascinating for me is I think a lot of people who are progressive have a judgment of people who are more conservative, that they're, quote, stupid or misinformed. My brother has that same opinion about people who are progressive and liberal. So, which is fascinating to me.
We find that people on both sides have the same exact judgments: liberals, conservatives, Democrats, Republicans, and they say it with just as much, emphatic anger. Before you go on, I've heard an analogy of the video camera when you're observing.
Yes.
That analogy seems to work for me. Do you want to share that a little? Or
yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned that. And what I like to emphasize at trainings is this is not just a concept, it's an actual tool. When NVC trainers say, imagine you have a video camera, what would you see? What does the video camera capture? What is the audio and what is the video that camera captures? I'm concerned sometimes people say, oh yeah, that's a nice concept. And I like to emphasize, no, it's not a concept, it's a tool. If you actually use it, it will give you the observation. And I like to add to it by saying, imagine you're a fly on the wall with a video camera. So the fly is all those eyes. We have that expression in English about being a fly on the wall who's like kind of, unbiased, impartial. So imagine you're a fly on the wall. But what's fascinating to me is how hard that can be in itself. There's an Indian philosopher, Krishnamurti, who once said, an observation free of judgment is the highest form of human intelligence.
Wow.
And what I find in teaching nonviolent communication, this was years ago, like 15 years ago, I used to lead a practice group in the West Village every week. And there was a woman who would come every week, pretty much, and would say, my boss is an idiot. And that's an observation. So she was learning a little NVC. She was convinced that that was an observation. I'd say, okay. I decided not to argue with her because I didn't think that would be effective. I said, so I'm hearing you say that your boss is an idiot. What did he do this week? What did he say this week that's leading you to think that he's an idiot? That's what's going to give us the actual observation. But what's fascinating to me is we believe our judgments so intensely. And Doug, that's what I was hearing you say a moment ago when you say it doesn't matter people on the left or the right. They really believe that their story, their interpretation of things is accurate. By the way, one reason I love the name of your show is I have read that, in fact, the vast majority of people in the United States politically are somewhere in purple. And it's the minority that are it's one extreme or the other. But of course, those are the ones that get the media attention. Those are the ones out protesting, whatever.
The squeaky wheel.
Exactly. So it's, it gets our attention. But it's helpful to know that, quote, I don't like to use the word moral, but that old line, the moral majority, the middle, the purple is the real majority in the US. And I think that's helpful and reassuring to know, because I can get anxious when I think about how polarized. And certainly there is polarization in the US, in my opinion. I don't mean to also sweep that under the carpet, but I think it's helpful to know that statistically the vast majority of Americans are in that purple area.
Yay.
Nice.
Agreed. We even showed a while back a map that somebody made of the US, of the red and the blue states, and all of them were some shade of purple.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, instead of painting it blue or red, it painted it purple and just had it a little bit more on the red or blue depending. But yeah, none of them were completely red or completely blue. Armand, you were telling me before we came on, I don't know if this is an appropriate time to mention it or not, about one of the things that had triggered you and what your observation was on Facebook about. You remember what I'm talking about?
Yes, I would just like to get a little clarity on a possible use of the tools. Yes, Doug?
I was just going to say, Dean, if this is not the right time to do an example of observation, but okay.
Yeah, let's hear one. We can just go through the 4 steps with this example, probably.
So for about 5 years, I've been practicing what I call learning different political languages. I want to learn how progressives talk. And think. I did a lot of research and found out that there have been studies from lots of universities. Nature versus nurture when it comes to politics. There's a lot of nature there. Yes, you can be nurtured to be conservative or liberal, but there's a lot of nature, and it's a beautiful thing for diversity. It's built in. And so trying to learn the different languages so I could speak everybody's political language as much as possible. My biggest challenge is when somebody uses a statement like your brother, or, this election was stolen. It was stolen by a Kabbalistic cult that wants to get the only person out of office that could ever really fix America's problems. I have difficulty communicating in a healthy way because I make up a story that they're closed and they hate me and I'm not going to go anywhere. And yet I want to try to do it. So that's my biggest challenge. How do you deal with somebody who says the earth is flat, or the election was rigged, or liberals eat babies?
Right. Well, first of all, I just want to say, Armand, I'm hearing the challenge when you hear someone say something that for you might be overwhelming, that might seem such a gap between your understanding of what you see happening in the world. So I imagine among other needs that might come up for you might be shared reality, for example.
Beautiful. Shared reality. There's sometimes I'm getting none of that, and that's my need. Thank you.
Yeah. And probably also, I'm guessing a desire for hope, some confidence that this is even doable, and wanting to use energy effectively and to hope that there's possible for some movement forward and shared understanding. And I started by empathizing with you as a way to illustrate. And by the way, for people who are new to NVC, well, people who aren't might have recognized what I was just doing, listening to Armand, is I skipped the recapping, but I was already listening to what I was hearing as your feelings and needs, and said, wow, it sounds like it could be overwhelming. And among other needs might be wanting some shared reality. And I guess I did recap a little bit because I was saying about how you see this gap between what you're hearing them say and information you might have. So I wanted to start there because the very first thing I recommend anyone does as a pre-step is what in a business setting I call self-management, a non-business setting we usually call it self-empathy, but is to manage your own internal responses. Because, earlier I talked about how unexpressed fear, how it turns up for other people. We don't even realize that we're coming across as aggressive. It's not our intention. But if we're feeling anxious, concerned, withdrawn, we're going to come across differently. So if you can, and be experienced probably differently by the other person. So if you can manage your own internal responses and connect with what you're really desiring. And, I just met both of you today, but I'm already getting an idea of your values from this program that you're doing, this podcast, that my guess is you are looking for peace and harmony and hope about a way forward and connection. And if you stay connected with your intention for connection, this is really tough. It's really challenging. I really would like connection with this person. At the moment, I'm feeling a little hopeless about it. I'm feeling kind of scared, but I really want that connection. If you can stay connected with your intention through your needs, that becomes like what I call lodestar. And that can help guide how you continue in that conversation. So if you can kind of keep coming back to, this is scary, this is hard, and I really do want to connect.
Thank you.
That'll help focus.
You just saved me a lot of therapy.
Well, if that pre-step is powerful in itself. And then once you've done that self-management work, you can use the 4 steps of nonviolent communication to actually dialogue or attempt a dialogue with the person. And, I would definitely start with recapping first. But I find interesting about recapping, which, by the way, is more often called by psychologists mirroring or reflecting. I prefer to call it recapping because, in my opinion, it's the least jargony way to describe it, because recapping is short in English for recapitulation, which is what you're doing. You're not reflecting on what the person said. You're recapitulating. You're repeating back, in effect, what you heard them say. Now, often say, oh, well, they're going to be offended by that. I actually don't find that if I let them know why I'm doing it. And it's not because they're stupid or they are insufficient in some way. It's because I want confidence that I have heard you accurately. So I take responsibility for it. Let me tell you what I heard you say so I know that I heard you. I want confidence.
Or so, Dian, if you don't mind, just for a second, I want to share with you what I heard you just say there, just so I make sure that I'm on the same page as you are, or I'm understanding what you're saying correctly. Is that okay?
Yeah, thank you.
And then I go ahead and do it. Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that helps a lot.
Love it.
And then
it
if
sounds
the person
like
says, go Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, it sounds like one more opportunity to get out of here and get back to here. Because recap, you have to get in here to do that.
Absolutely. Yes. And if you are preparing to recap, it just puts you, it puts you in a different mindset. You're listening in a different way from the start of the conversation.
Love it.
So,
Love it.
yeah, so I would start by recapping, which in effect is the observation step. What I also love about recapping is sometimes the person will dial back a little bit. You know, like if, you know, to go back to the example I gave earlier, or actually give me the line that you had, Armand. We'll work with your example more. The person, I think, said to you something like, there is a cult, this, dark state cult and conspiracy to get rid of the one leader that was going to save the United States. If you can recap that back to the person and say, yeah, I'm hearing that you're really concerned and alarmed. Actually, I'm mixing empathy now with that. I'm already putting the feelings in there, but I'm hearing that, your view, and sounds like you're really concerned about it, that, and scared, even anxious, that the one person who was going to lead us forward has been removed, is from office, and that's a conspiracy. And I imagine that is really scary, really troubling. And that you just really would like peace of mind and some hope for the future of our country and integrity about our election process.
Just hearing you say that feels so good to me. The concept that I can resonate with someone so deeply instead of allowing myself to react based on a trigger. It just feels so good.
And it also adds, not only am I being heard if I'm the person on the other end of the computer, but I'm also being honored. Like, even if Armand doesn't agree with me, I feel heard. And now I feel honored that he said, yeah, that must be really scary to believe that the only person that can save this country is the one that's being cheated out of office. Wow, okay. I just feel validated, whether he believes it or not.
Yeah. And by the way, sometimes people have trouble recapping, I find, because they're concerned that the other person is going to think that you are agreeing with them. So sometimes when I'm recapping, I'll put a little caveat in there and say, I just want to, what I'm hearing. By the way, I'm not saying I agree. I might see it differently, but I first want to start out by letting you know that I'm hearing what you're saying.
Beautiful. And you're also not patronizing. That would be another thing somebody might think you would be doing. They're patronizing me. And
sure. Now, yeah. Does that flow right into the first step, the observation?
Yeah. So that is in effect the observation. And then you say, if the person says, yeah, that's what I said. Now, by the way, once you recap, they might say more, because I find once someone knows that they're being listened to, it can open a floodgate, especially, someone from, quote, the other side that never listens. And here is one liberal who's now listening. So they might then give you more information. So part of the skill set here sometimes is saying, okay, I'm hearing other ideas. Can we stay with the first one first? I want to know that I first got that one, because part of what is key in this is managing your own overwhelm. And like I find with my brother, by the way, and I don't think it's unique with him, is that I could probably listen to him for 2 or 3 hours. And I don't think I'm exaggerating here. 2 or 3 hours of recapping and empathizing. And it might take that long before he would have space to hear me. And I may not have the energy to do that. So sometimes I reach a point of saying, okay, I think I've listened to as much as I can today. Are you open to hearing my viewpoint? Sometimes he's not. But I just want to let listeners know that sometimes it can take a long time. But ideally, in terms of these 4 steps, once you recapped and they said, yeah, that's right, that's what I said, say, okay. And my guess is, so once I have the observation, my guess is you're really concerned about, from your view, seeing the election stolen, because it's scary, because you care about the integrity of our elections, the integrity of our democracy, and nervous about having any kind of control about what's happening. Because I imagine if this is all happening like, sub-dark state through some kind of cult, what power and control do we have? That's really scary. Because it's a basic human need to want to have, and basic survival need to have some control over our environment.
can you explain that a little bit more for our viewers and listeners, the F and the N part of the second and third step, and how you did that?
So the observation is, I'm hearing you say that you're concerned that there's this massive conspiracy, this dark state that is removing the one person that you're seeing could save our country. That's the observation. Feeling, I imagine that's really scary, really anxiety provoking. That's the feeling. The need. By the way, I wouldn't be saying this to the person. Here's your observation. Here's your feeling. Here's your need. I'm just doing this to make it clear, right?
Sure.
Showing people the map. The needs that I was guessing would be, wow, my guess is you really want peace of mind about the future of our country. You care about the integrity of our elections and our democratic processes, and want some sense, like, if it's this dark state, what power and control do we have? That's really scary.
Now, do you also then take it and say...
And by the way, that was the need, and I didn't get to the request, so I just wanted to tag that. The fourth step is a request.
I was just going to ask if Armand said that, would he then say, when I hear you say that he is being cheated out of office and we're entering a dark state, I feel anger, I feel shaken, I feel sad, and I have a need for connection with you. Like, does he turn it around and start talking about what Armand wants?
Yeah, you can do that as well. No, you can do that as well. I think I sent you both a list of resources on my website, and one of them is an intro packet, and there's a flow chart in there, and you'll see the top of the flow chart says self-empathy, and then there's two other columns. One is honest expression, and one is empathic listening. There is a core concept in nonviolent communication called empathy before education. And the way I like to explain empathy before education is and by the way, this is a long way of answering your question. I will bring this full circle. But if you imagine you have 2 glasses of water and they're both full, it's a law of physics. What's going to happen when you pour one into the other? Overflow. There's not space. So what we are doing, in effect, when we're empathizing with someone is helping to create a little bit of space in the conversation. Now, the reason I was mentioning this now, Doug, is, yes, that is the hope that eventually you will get to be heard too. And the point I mentioned earlier is if someone is really triggered and there's a history there, it may take more than 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 rounds of empathy for them to be heard. So you may need to be self-managing internally and waiting. And by the way, the request, people, when they think of a request, I think we practice different types of requests in nonviolent communication. They usually immediately go to the strategy request, and 90%, I would say, of the requests that we make in nonviolent communication is actually a different kind of request. It's a connection request, because that's what we're really looking for, is connection. So rather than saying, like, I'm going to give an extreme example, based on the conversation that Armand was describing. If I was going to go way too quickly, in my opinion, to a strategy request, and I want to emphasize, listeners, viewers, I am not suggesting this. This is like an example, in my opinion, of what to avoid, okay? Going too quickly, what I call premature stratification, would be to, you got that, thank you. Some people get it, sometimes they don't. It's a little off color, but my effort for a little fun.
You're a New Yorker, we expect that, so.
Anyway, going too quickly to a strategy in this situation might sound like, once you empathize with the person, to say, well, I feel really scared hearing you say that. I'm really longing for shared reality. Would you please read these 3 articles that can show you that your theories are completely off? They are not ready for that. That's gonna build the metaphorical wall. So,
I can hear Dr. Phil right now. How's that working for you?
Yeah. So a connection request instead, which I am recommending, would be, is that accurate? Did I get it? Did I hear you? Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Man, that makes me tear up. It's just so simple and
Now
not
here I
taught?
am. I'm a politician, in the Senate. I don't have time for that. We just need to get to the issue. How do you answer that?
Yeah, and I want to check, Doug, are you suggesting that you are the senator that I'm speaking to? Or someone talking about the
Sure.
senator? Yeah.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
by the
Let
way,
me be a senator, and you just suggested that I do that with my colleague who I'm disagreeing with on an issue, or
Right.
a bill that's trying to be passed. And I say, I don't have time to do all that. We just need to talk about the issue, Dian. If I do that, we're going to be here till next Wednesday, and the vote's tomorrow.
Well, by the way, because I do work regularly with organizations and companies, I hear that kind of thought regularly in a work context, working with whether it's a startup, a nonprofit, or a Fortune 100 company. Everyone, in my opinion, and I don't think it's improved working from home, because now I think a lot of us are just working more because we can, work in our pajamas at 10 o'clock at night even easier. But my point is most people I know are struggling around time. So a concept I often talk about in a work setting is this idea of pay now or pay later. And I hate to put it that way, but I did a bunch of training for Merck about 10 years ago, and they were so impressed with the impact of the first round of training. They did an in-house study. They hired me to do another round of training, a leadership program for another couple of teams, 3 teams actually, simultaneously. And one thing they found in that study, which came out anecdotally from the people who participated in it, is one of the questions was, how does practicing collaborative communication or nonviolent communication impact efficiency? And it was very consistent what the findings were. People said consistently, it seems like it's taking longer up front because you're having a conversation when you might just let it go in that moment. In the long run, it saves so much time. We are way more efficient in the long run. It is an excellent investment of time to have that conversation up front.
So we might have to front load the work of connection in order to get the results down the road, but down the road, we're going to be much more effective because of it.
Yeah. And I just want to say, I'm a little sad saying this. And in my opinion, I heard a really interesting show on Freakonomics Radio on NPR about 8 weeks ago. It was actually a rerun about the two-party system. So that's a whole other podcast for you to consider, which is pretty interesting, about the two-party system in the US and how that kind of intensifies the red state, blue state thinking. Whole other topic. But they made some interesting points in there, including, I think I heard this there, that when you disagree, people have this idea again that information is going to solve it, and that doesn't actually solve it. What people need is empathy. But also I wanted to point out that, and I'm a little sad to say this, but structurally, in my opinion, the two-party system is structured in a way that it does not encourage people to hear the other side, because it's like for political gain, there's this, people are kind of put against each other, so to speak, on a structural level. So I'm sad to say that, but I just wanted to name that because for me, when there is limitations to nonviolent communication, it's because there's this larger structural thing going on that's getting in the way of just two human beings connecting,
Mm-hmm.
And I've heard that a lot as well, what's going on, why certain people in the GOP haven't been willing to speak up about their discomfort, about what they see Trump doing the last few weeks and not recognizing that he lost the election, is, because they empathizing with them. My guess is they believe in what they're doing in the Senate. They want to continue doing their work. They enjoy their work. They enjoy contributing in this way. They want to get elected again. And when they see the level of popularity that Trump has and how many people did vote for him in the election, they're concerned about saying anything that would seem critical of Trump. So that's a particular strategy. So I'm a little sad bringing that in, and I'm also a realist. And, if someone's listening and saying, having a judgment, wow, that's naive, I want to say, I don't think I'm naive. I think this is a very powerful communication process, and there can be larger structural issues at play that get in the way of human beings connecting, just as human beings. But if we can just connect as human beings, nonviolent communication is profound.
Let me ask you a question about structure. And I've been exposed to NVC off and on through my work, but never quite like this. And I'm thrilled that Lisa turned us on to you. So I've been watching so many videos and things like that. I watched all the way through the one that you did with Edwin Rutsch several years ago. And like I said, I had to watch the whole thing twice because there was so much good valuable. But am I wrong in feeling that a lot of these concepts would appeal more to the feminine side of humanity and the liberal side of humanity than the other two structures?
I've never been asked that before. That's a really fascinating question to me. Well, I'm going to answer your question in a very different way. I don't know what the neurological answer is about that and if research has been conducted. I did very much appreciate Doug's point that he made earlier in the program, and I've read about that too, that a certain amount of the population seems hardwired to be, quote, conservative. And if we hold the big picture, it would seem that it was nature's way of helping us survive. Because if you're a certain amount of the population, come on, let's go, let's do this. And another part of the population saying, wait, no, the past was better, or we're moving too quickly. That in effect creates a balance for us. There's research suggesting that people who are neurologically wired differently, like with ADD brains, for example, they have a certain way of contributing that helps our survival as a species that non-ADD brains, and people who have other kind of neurological differences. So, all of this research is coming out now. So I guess I'm just saying all that for context. And I don't know neurologically it's an interesting question. I'm going to Google it after the program. Is the parts of the brain that are hardwired to do with empathy, are they more strongly developed in female brains? I don't know. I do know that the vast majority of humans, I forget the percentage, it's very small percentage of the population that's considered literally to be a psychopath. The value, 99%, or even I think it's higher than that, human beings are naturally empathic. So now I did want to say, this might seem really off topic, but earlier in my life, before I became an NVC trainer, one thing that, once you're my age, you can have had several lifetimes in one lifetime already. And as an academic, one of my specialties was rhetorical theory and classical and modern rhetoric. Doug mentioned earlier my Ph.D. I also have a background in cultural studies, critical and narrative theory, but connected to that rhetorical theory. And I'm mentioning that because I think most people would associate rhetoric, especially its history, going back to the Greek rhetoricians and Cicero, and as a very male kind of practice, the people debating in Greece who developed classical rhetoric. Only men were allowed in the Senate. But what I find interesting, while you would think nonviolent communication is very different from rhetoric, they both have the same a couple of starting points in common. Because in classical rhetoric, one of the first things you learn is getting clear about your terms. That's what we do in nonviolent communication by recapping and getting the observation. What are we actually talking about? So the classical rhetoricians came up with that more than 2,000 years ago. Another thing the rhetoricians, I hope this is not too much of a rabbit hole for you, but it's just where my brain went in response to your question. Another thing the classical rhetoric identified before modern psychology is that we like to think that we are rational beings and that the rational appeal is the strongest. In fact, it's the emotional appeal. It's what the classical rhetoricians call the ethical appeal. The ethical appeal is not about ethics. It's about our perception of the other person's values and their ethics. Can we trust them as a person? Now, look at Trump. He has a very strong ethical appeal with many people. I'm not saying he's ethical. I'm using this classical term, that how he presents his persona clearly speaks to many, many people. Very down to earth, very direct. I think that encourages trust for a certain number of people in the population. He is meeting them. But my point is, classical rhetoric is very male. You would see it as a very male thing, I think, at least historically, not anymore. So, and some parallels with nonviolent communication. I find that fascinating. So I'm not sure it's true, but I don't know what the neurological answer is.
Thank you.
Interesting.
I think it's both, depending on the empathy versus rhetoric. It's covering both and all. So that's awesome.
Wow. Now, in the interest of time, because we're just about complete with our time, and I know you need to go because you're incredibly busy. What I hear you saying in general, and I want to talk to the laywoman out there, just the people living their daily lives, going about their work, trying to figure out Zoom, trying to figure out COVID, whether to wear a mask or not, how to get along with their spouse or their children, how to have a family dinner at Thanksgiving without yelling at each other because of politics. I hear you saying basically that NVC is just a way to have everybody get their needs met, as opposed to everybody fighting to try to get their needs met over someone else's. But that if you actually take the time...
at least to trust that your needs matter. It is not always doable to meet every need every single second, for me individually or anybody. I just wanted to put that out there. Again, valuing realism. Okay?
Okay, great. So go ahead.
I was going to say, quick example of that, navigating my own needs every day, just to flesh that out, is like, sometimes when I used to go out more, and as a musician, you guys know I'm also a musician, and I come back late at night after a show, sometimes I was hungry and tired, 1 o'clock in the morning, and I'm like, okay, am I going to eat something, or am I going to go right to bed? I make a joke about it. I usually eat something, but anyway, the point is, you're either going to eat something now or you're going to go to sleep. I mean, even if you bring something to bed, you're still going to be doing, because I can't eat while I'm sleeping. So like, that's a basic example of how do you hold your needs with care? Okay. You can't necessarily meet all of them every single second, but they all matter to us.
That reminds me of the quote. Oh,
no, go ahead, Norman.
That reminds me of a quote that you gave, on one of the YouTubes I saw. When we're children, our desire is to be held. When we're adults, our desire is to be heard. And I like that. It's not as difficult to let somebody know that you value them and their thoughts and their needs are valuable as it is to meet those needs.
Yes.
So if we were going to start, I'm a listener or a viewer of this podcast, and I say, wow, if everybody can at least have their needs matter or feel like my needs matter to the other people, and heck, we might even both get our needs met. That sounds like a nice alternative to all the fighting that's going on here lately, especially with the kids or the in-laws or whatever. How do I get started? Like we said, an awful lot of information in this short hour, and Dian said 20 years of practice. Is there a simple way to get started on any of this?
Well, for me, the recapping is a low-hanging fruit. It's really easy to practice. One of the resources on that page I sent is a handout on recapping that gives an overview of how to do it and how to offer a request and request a recap in a way that's more connecting for people. But the other thing is, what I said earlier is like, get clear about your intentions. Are you having a conversation with this person because you want to be right? Or are you having a conversation because there's someone in your family and at the end of the day, you do want connection? Are you talking to them because it's leading up to the election and you actually hope they're going to vote differently? Get clear about, and that's a strategy. So if you do want them to vote differently, what's that about? That's about you having peace of mind about the future. Now, by the way, if you get clear about that, as I did, rather than talking about this with my brother, which, yes, I would love to, quote, convert him or get on the same page. It was way more effective for me to volunteer at the Sierra Club, making phone calls and writing letters to people who, like me, care about the environment to get the vote out. That is a way more effective use of my time. So I want to say just briefly, the beauty of getting clear about my own needs is I often change my strategy. If your strategy really is like, I wanted confidence, and by the way, Biden was not my first choice. I actually was way more excited about Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren. But, at the end of the day, yes, I was supporting Biden. So when I realized that my main need was wanting confidence about someone, yes, I was anyone but Trumper, someone other than Trump being in office, I was like, well, talking to my brother and his immediate circle is that an effective use of my time? So getting clear about your needs, and then maybe you're going to choose a different strategy. Now, if it's about connecting with my brother, then I will probably empathize. I'll look for what we have in common. We're both scared. Well, I'm a little less scared now. It's not like I'm going back to sleep, but we're both scared. We're worried about the future. We want some sense of choice, security. So can we connect on that level?
Wow.
Dian, incredible. Workcollaboratively.com. Is that correct? Is that where people can go to get the basics of NVC and your work? And I believe nonviolentcommunication.com and even CNVC, standing for the Center of Nonviolent Communication.org.
Yep.
Those are all good places to get information. But Dian Killian, workcollaboratively.com is how to get in touch with her. Is that correct?
Yep. I go by she and her, and that is the website.
Yeah. That's not what I meant, but yes, that's a great answer. How else can they get in touch with you is where I was going with that.
Yeah, through my website, and people can join a newsletter there. And by the way, if you are interested in nonviolent communication, I want listeners to know about an incredible opportunity coming up, in my opinion, in January, which is a 9-day virtual intensive training in nonviolent communication. And I'll be one of the trainers, and some other very well-known and well-loved NVC trainers, including Robert Gonzalez, for example. And I'm so excited about this VIT because it's going to be the first bilingual VIT. And it will be in Spanish and English. And because we are really wanting to bring together all of the Americas, North, Central, and South America, we're offering this VIT through the Center for Nonviolent Communication on a sliding scale. So we're hoping people in North America will join at the higher level to help out people who are registering in South and Central America, who sometimes are living on $300 a year. But the point is, it's on a sliding scale. So, some people are also struggling in the United States. So I just want your listeners to know, if you're unemployed, if you're struggling financially and you want to attend this VIT, it is being offered on a sliding scale. And we're asking people to give as much as you can to support this work and us doing more of this work in South and Central America and around the world. But it is on a sliding scale, and we want everyone to know you can participate regardless of your financial means. And you can learn more.
How do they find out about it?
You can learn more about the VIT on my website, and also by going to cnvc.org.
Wonderful, wonderful. It has been an honor to spend this hour with you, Dian. Thank you so much. I just can't say enough, and we're going to get the word out. So we appreciate your time.
Thank you, gentlemen, and thank you for your work. And I hope that your work and everyone doing this kind of work has an impact, so that we can hear each other in this country and really make some changes. Because last thing I'll say, on a structural level, my opinion, I do own this as my opinion, it's not NVC. In my view, we need to address the economic divisions in this country, which is a structural issue. And how are we going to do that without communicating with each other? So for me, that's my meta strategy. Because I think there's such a disparity economically in the US, which is what's feeding a lot of the fear and anxiety. There's no social net in the United States, which I know is a progressive view, but I do have my strategy. But how can we hear each other to address those social inequities so there's less anxiety, less division, more collaboration in our country?
Well, this has been eye-opening.
Yes, I'm inspired. I've never been more inspired to practice these ideas more than I am right now after spending an hour with you.
Yay. Thank you so much. And thank you for your work.
Okay. You got it. You take care. We'll talk soon.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye, Dian.
Bye.
Bye now.
Dang. That was so clear. I'm going to be using these principles. I'm going to be better at being purple as a result of an hour with Dian.
No kidding.
Right to the core. Exactly what I most needed. My blind spot. She added so much clarity to it. This is very, very exciting. Wow.
Yeah, it made me grateful that there are a couple conversations I want to have with people that I haven't had yet, and they're fresh. I usually keep up to date on this stuff pretty well, so these are fresh, but I'm glad I haven't had them yet, because that just gave me some more training in another way for me to have those conversations, or even pre-conversations. Wow, that's a lot of information.
Same here. Same here.
Yeah, for sure. Now, of course, I've studied quite a bit of this since I have heard about it from Lisa Firestone, and since I knew Dian was going to be on our show, I've done the research and learned about nonviolent communication. So I kind of knew probably more than a lot of our listeners or viewers on what she was talking about. But I would encourage our listeners and viewers to go to workcollaboratively.com and really just get what she didn't say was that she does have this basic introductory pack on her website. And so if you go to workcollaboratively.com, one of the first links is that basic packet that's free. You don't have to pay for it. And it lists, first of all, what NVC is all about and how to go through these steps to either get everybody's needs met or at least feel like your needs are being heard and they matter. And for everybody, as silly as this might sound, but for people to start getting along, even if they have differing opinions, which obviously is what we talk about on the show all the time. So I would say go to workcollaboratively.com and just look at the basics, because it is a simple thing to start, even if it takes a lifetime to master, as they say. It's a simple thing to start.
I love it.
So, wow. Well, cool. Thanks for this this hour, brother.
Yeah, thank you for setting it up and making it happen, my friend.
Yeah. Anything you want to share with us to take us out?
Just one more little way to tie it all in, and that is we may not have the same fears, or they may not be approached from the same idea, but we all have fears. We all have patriotism. We all have so much more in common. If we can get past the little stuff by reminding each other that the other side of the field and the other person's fears matter to all of us. Wow, we could really, this has gotten me excited. We can move the needle on this divisiveness, my friend. Remember, there are good people in the world. If you can't find one, be one. Let's make America civil again.
I don't know when they're wrong people. We're all different shades of humanity. I don't know when they're liberal people. I don't know when they're conservative people. We're all different shades of humanity. But let me tell you now, we are all the same. One race.
No politicians were harmed in the making of this podcast.
The Purple Evolution would love to hear from you. Please contact us by visiting thepurpleevolution.org. You can send us an email, post a comment, ask a question, make a recommendation or a critique on our webpage, become a patron, or even shop for Purple Evolution products and gifts from our store. We are just one click away. thepurpleevolution.org. That's thepurpleevolution.org. We look forward to your visit.